Hello, everybody. Welcome back. And if you're just joining us, just to catch you up in the last video, I was having trouble finding my lines right here. And I'm just going to tell you briefly how I kind of figured out what was happening. It's a combination of issues with the display. And then how these things were illuminated, our reference images. So just to briefly tell you that, we'll then get back into editing points and things, or editing curves, I'm sorry. So I come over here to display, right next to my help tab panel, and what it is, my shadows weren't on, which you can see how that, for whatever reason, is hidden those lines. I'm not exactly sure why. I've never really encountered this problem before, but that's how I can change it. Now, that also, when I turn shadows on, caused these panels to illuminate. So what I had to do was to just go back to my properties panel, go back to my material, and turn self-illuminating off. Just so that they wouldn't be so bright and block my view of these lines. So that is just a quick update to solve that problem. If you two are also have that issue, so I'm just going to go back to help, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to hide my front legs because I'm just going to focus on the back legs. Now this line I drew in the back leg layer, so I'm going to move it out of the way, move it to its proper layer for right now, and I am going to double click on right layer and see what we got. So again, look, you see our curve here. Oops. And then I'm going to come back and lock those reference images. So now I have my curve, and we want to edit it because it's not exactly what we want. I'm going to come back here, and I'm actually just going to make a new layer here in the main part. And I'm just going to say curve. No, let's do back leg curve. And I'm going to move this curve here, move objects to this layer, and then hide that reference geometry. Work in this layer, then hide that geometry. And the reason I'm doing that is because when I select this curve, now sometimes this is actually disabled potentially, which I actually prefer that be disabled. So I'm going to come back here and turn this off. Now this is what happens when you turn on control points when selecting a curve, lighter annotations. I'm going to turn that off. Again, that's in the mouse options of your preference tab. That can be found, preference tab can be found in preferences. And the reason is because sometimes when I've got a lot of points, I don't really feel like dealing with those. So I'm going to hit exit. Now, when I edit points, because I have that off now, I can come over here and I can say turn points on or off. And then also this drop-down menu gives me a whole lot of options. This is also found in the curves tool here, where there's a lot of different options to make curves. But I'm going to just turn on those control points. If you're in the curves tool tab, this should be it. I'm going to select that objects, hit enter. Likewise, you can just hit the turn control points on. And what I can do is I can come back and then edit these curves to make them a little bit cleaner. Now, one thing is that if I edit this point here, if I move it over, it's not editing this other point to be symmetric. What I can do with that is I can select both points here, and then I can use my scale tab. You see this? It's kind of in line with this point here, which is a little frustrating, but I can grab that, scale option because it's going to scale it in one dimension. It's essentially seeing it as moving these evenly. It's a little trick. So if you want these to be edited symmetrically, you can use the scale option when your gumball is on in the direction you want to move them. So down here, I think I might move these legs in a little bit, or these points, I'm sorry, these control points in a little bit to make that curve just a little straighter. You can see it's a little straight. Now it's not exactly lined up with our leg right now, but that's all right. Now up here we can see that this curve is not following this silhouette here. And that's because there are only a few control points here based off of the interpolate curve that we made earlier, or interpolate through points. I'm going to turn this off. And I'm just going to bring back my mirror plane because what I can do a couple of options. I'm going to put a new point. I'm just going to say near. I'm going to put a point here. Now this isn't a control point, but I'm going to turn it into a control point in a second. I just want to make sure that I'm adding, I want end on so that I can reference that correctly. So now I've got these 2 points symmetrically, and what I can do is I can come over here and I can add a control point. Where are you? Add point. Insert not, remove a control point. Interesting. Where did you go? Insert a control point. I don't know why it took me so long to see that. It's okay. It happens to the best of us. So select curve. I'm going to select this curve, and then my point is on, so I'm going to select that point. And then it adds that extra control point there that I can then edit. And I'm going to come back here and do the same thing. There we go. And you know what? You see how this is kind of flattened out right here? I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to turn my intersection snap on because then it can go to that intersection there. And you see how it kind of flattened it out a little bit. Oops. Oh, shoot. I hit escape instead of enter, which means I'm going to come back and very quickly redo all of that. I know, it happens to the best of us. My intersection snap is on right there, and then I'm going to hit enter. And then what I can do is I can come in and I can move that control point to maybe make that curve a little bit better. Now, of course, what I didn't do was move them in unison. So I just want to make sure I'm selecting them in unison. I'm going to move that up, and then I'm going to just use the scale, come in and move those over. And you can see how much better that is, just to make sure that it flows nicely. So for example, these three, I want these three to maintain the same height. I'm just going to drop them down a little bit. And there we go. So that's the nice thing about these control points. Now, you could have also generated your curve by connecting the points as control points, but I think it's a little bit better to do interpolate points to get that rough image to see what it looks like. Now it looks like I also made a mistake here, and I'm going to select these guys and move them in because that curve, I want that curve to follow the center. I was going to the outside edge to the center. That looks a little bit better. And, you know, I'm okay with this for right now. This area is not being, it's not in line with the original image, but that's quite all right. So that looks pretty good. Now, when I hit escape, these control points are going to go away. And what I want to check now is I'm going to double click on my views here. And you can see this one is actually a little off. And that might be because When I was moving these or adding these points, they might have been a little out of plane, but I can turn my control points on. And then for right here, I just want to make sure that I'm doing a larger box selection so that I can move those two control points. Again, remember, we're going for symmetry here, so I want to try to move symmetrical objects in unison or scale them in unison. So that's looking a lot better. That's looking way nicer, super clean. That curve, this leg's going to be sexy curves, sexy chair legs. Now I can choose to keep these control point or these points if I want. I can move them back to my reference geometry. Why not? Move objects to layer. And there we go. So we've got our curve nice and edited here. Now let us, do we need to do anything for the front leg here? Front leg looks pretty straight and self-explanatory. So I don't think we really need to do much there, but maybe we want to move that point back here a little bit and reference it. What I can do is over here in point, I can do closest point. And this will become important maybe later on when I'm adding points on different curves and things. And it says select target objects for closest point. And I want to say I want this point to be closest to this curve. I'm going to hit enter. It's going to ask me for the point I want to move. And I'm going to click that point. And you see it made a second point that is the closest distance to that point. Now, it might not be exactly in line, but that's okay. That's what we're going for. And then I can delete that point. Because I deleted that point, I'm also going to delete the point on this end. And I'm going to work in the front leg view. I'm going to select that. Oop. I'm going to select that curve and that point, and then mirror those so we have it. And snap. Oh, take your time, computer. And there we go. All right. That is great. We've got our legs. Now, what about... Oh, of course, they are hidden now for... Oh, all right. They're back. So I'm going to turn my... It's thinking. Turn my control points back on for here. And you see some of our curves got, or some of our reference points got a little off, which is all right. What I can do is, if I want to, and I especially want those points, I'm going to hide the work in the back leg. The points that are connecting the seat, I'm really want that intersection. I really want that point to be referenced with the line. So again, I'm going to do the curve closest point. Come back over here, closest point, and I'm going to say that point. I'm going to hit enter, reinitiate the command and hit that point, and there we go. And I'm going to just make sure to delete those extra points. And now, let's see, well, these points should be in the front leg. Now, if you want to leave all your reference geometry on one single layer, that's fine. It's just be aware of sometimes it might be easier to have them all in separate layers just to keep track of it all. Okay, so now how can I make this seat? And right now I'm just going to keep it easy and make it circular. Just a simple circular seat. Now, the nice thing is I have all these points to the top of the front line, which, oh, come on, computer. Here we go. This curve, these points are all symmetric to each other. Now, what I can do is I can do a 3-point circle, which is going to make a circle based off of only 3 points. And the reason I'm doing 3 points is so that I can reference maybe 2 back points and then one of these front points. And then that 4th point should intersect. Because essentially what it is this is, if you look at, because these points and these points are symmetrical, these 4 points should all make a plane. If you were to connect all of these into a surface, it should be a flat surface due to the symmetry of those points, or the symmetry of this chair. And we can check this. It's always good to kind of check yourself. So point, back point, and then one of the, either the front leg point or maybe the rear leg point. And there we go. And we can see here that it's connecting nicely. Now, to check, I don't know why the OpenGL or whatever, I'm going to delete this point. And what I can do to check, or a good option if I want that point to come back, and to see if they're actually intersecting, is I'm going to come up here over to my tool palette, and where it says project curves, I'm going to come down and I'm going to select object intersection. And I'm going to select that circle and then that curve. Now, hopefully your curve isn't hidden. But what it's going to do is, depending on what type of object is intersecting with another object, you might get a point, a curve, or maybe, depending on what it is, the surface. But more than likely, it's going to be a point or a curve. So I'm going to hit enter. And in fact, they are intersecting because that point kind of came up. If no points were being intersected, sometimes what can happen is in your command line, it'll say no intersections. So right down here in the command line, it says found 1 intersection in the lower left-hand corner, which is great. So I'm going to do a quick cleanup, and I'm going to put all of these curves onto separate layers. And then we can actually kind of make them into 3D objects. So I hope this video helped you see how you can edit control points, how you want to keep them as symmetric as possible, and methods of keeping them symmetric using Gumball. And we'll talk more about making this chair in the next video. See you soon.